Hello and welcome to the Transcendence Succeed Show. I'm your guest host, Megan North. Firstly, I would like to thank our sponsors of the show, Quantum Awakening, Voyage of Transcendence, and myself, and our lovely guest here today who paid to be featured on this episode. Talking about our lovely guest, today we are joined by Rosemary Gattuso, who is a true inspiration to me, and I only met her a few weeks ago. From the moment that we started talking, our conversation was coming from a place of heart and soul, which was just such a beautiful combination. So Rosemary is a specialist in family mediation and restorative justice, focusing on respect and children's well-being during separations. She serves on restorative justice panels and advocates for a trauma-informed, strength-based approach. Rosemary has a background in law, couples and family therapy, and family dispute resolution with advanced studies from Harvard University. She leads workshops on trauma-informed living and strengths-based practices. Her book, It's Not You, It's Me, a chronic overthinker's guide to self-reflection, this reflects on her journey from chronic overthinker to reflective practitioner, aiming to inspire positive changes in individuals and communities. Wow, I love this. Welcome to the show, Rosemary. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Megan. It's great to be here today.
Fantastic. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. As I said, I loved when we first met, so I'm really interested to dive deeper into all of these amazing things that you do for particularly the families that are going through, some really traumatic times in their lives. Can you start by sharing a bit about your journey and what inspired your shift from law to family mediation, the counselling and the writing?
Yeah. And I guess like many people, I got to where I am now by getting to a place that really wasn't for me and learning the hard way that it's not for me, because I always wanted to be a family lawyer. That was my dream. I wanted to work with families. I wanted to be in law. And once I started studying it, I soon realized that it didn't really suit my personality. It wasn't for me. And because of that, I probably would never be very good at it. But I didn't know what else to do. So I just finished my studies. Mm-hmm. And in the last 6 months of my legal studies, there was there's a practical component with a compulsory mediation topic. It was a subject that everyone had to do as part of the College of Law before you can practice. And most other students absolutely hated it. And I thought, oh, wow, this is where I need to be. So I thought, okay, I know why I needed to finish and sometimes be quite not miserable, but knowing that I'm doing something that doesn't really feel right for me, and knowing that it probably highlights my weaknesses rather than my strengths. Whereas I saw that mediation suited my personality better. And it really was a process that I would realize would be able to highlight my strengths, the strengths in me. Mm-hmm. So it's that journey of getting what or striving for what I thought I wanted to do and where I wanted to be, realizing that it wasn't the path for me, but along the way, I stumbled across one that was. And the more I studied and worked studied mediation, and particularly mediation with families, and worked as a family mediator, the more interest I got in the counselling side, the therapy, the trauma, child development, and that aspect. So really anything that gave more meaning to human behaviour. And I mean, as a mediator in Australia, I would be the first stop for separating parents or couples going through the court process. So you can't actually access a family court in Australia unless you've seen a mediator. And there are exceptions, but generally, if there are no safety concerns, you'd have to see a mediator. And, you know, a mediator is a neutral third party, independent, doesn't advise, non-judgmental, is there to really help guide the conversation in an open and respectful way. Mm. Whereas if you look at the legal process, you get a judgment. Mm. It's about you have to show your story and why you're right and, you know, why you should win. Whereas in mediation, I would say, well, maybe there can be two stories at the same time. Mm. It's not about proving one or the other. It's about how a family can work together in the best interest of the children, you know, when there are children, to get an outcome that really supports the family as a whole and the needs of the children.
Wow.
So the more that I started working with families, the more I started studying about families and trauma and child development. And that's what, you know, I guess got me into then becoming a couples counsellor and a family therapist. And I guess I should note that probably for, you know, the last sort of 10 years of this journey, I was always writing stories on the side. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a story. But I really had no idea at the time that it would turn into a self-help book based on my work as a mediator and proposing, you know, a strengths-based tool for self-reflection, because it was a fiction. It was a story about a mediator and her struggles and her journey and her strengths and her weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then I put all these stories together and actually wrote the last chapter of the book as a self-help book based on the main character.
Right.
And as part of my publishing process, I realised that I couldn't have a fiction and a non-fiction in one. So I just rewrote the last chapter as the entire book. Right. And that's how I started off studying law and practicing a bit as a solicitor, as a lawyer, and then moved on to mediation and self-help writing and dealing with families.
Wow, it's so amazing. And there's two things in there that I'm really interested in, it in the sense of, you know, you knew that you were studying something that wasn't heartfelt and you weren't passionate about. But isn't it interesting that by pushing through, and even though you didn't enjoy it, you actually got your aha moment right at the end of your study. Yeah. So I think it's a bit of a lesson, isn't it, in the sense of sometimes we're going through a journey and we think, oh my gosh, why am I being led still to do this? But then at the very last minute we get this breakthrough, and I think that's amazing that you got that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, really. And I bet you were really pleased in the end to think, actually, I'm glad I pushed through.
I was. And it was almost like, well, I didn't know what else to do. And I thought, well, I've started it. I'll just finish it because I knew it would come in handy, or it would be I just wanted to finish it. So it was like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the other thing too, Rosemary, and I can imagine, you know, only having known you for a short time, that I love that the work that you're doing is at the beginning of the process. So I can understand how some people, depending on, you know, how they're wired and how they've been brought up themselves, is the law piece is really the end game, isn't it? Like, it's the last part. Whereas for you, I can imagine that you started to see, hang on a minute, I can actually start to change the conversation, change how they're actually going to be going into the court process by doing this counselling and mediation at the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm,
And I mean, when I'm working as a mediator, I'm there really to facilitate a
mm,
conversation between two parents, or a couple who have separated. And so, I draw on, and I'm aware of my training in couples counselling and therapy, and have a therapeutic approach. But it's really up to the clients,
mm.
where they're at in their journey,
Yeah.
and where they want me to go. I guess I'm led by them, and sometimes that can be a longer process. Sometimes it can be quicker. Sometimes it can be, let's get what we need for the next 3 to 4 months
Yeah.
done, and then work on it, or come back in 3 years' time when there's a need to renegotiate, or they just never come back, or after a few years, or 1 or 2 years of regular sessions, then they just say thank you and they're gone.
Wow. And that would be so, I could just imagine how wonderful it would be for you to have that moment where they know that they don't need you anymore.
Yeah, and
And
that's really the goal.
yes.
I don't really, not that I don't want to have repeat clients, but everyone's journey is different. I
Yeah.
know with myself, I needed to go through these processes to get to where I am. So I'm not judging their processes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the end goal is for them to reach a point where they can, negotiate and make arrangements for their kids without a third party. But if they do, the service is there, because it is a trying time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know for myself, like I love all my coaching clients, but I do love it when they don't need me anymore, because, you do feel like, oh, I get this feeling and this sense of pride that actually I've loved being part of your journey, but I'm so proud of the fact that you actually don't need me anymore,
Yeah,
because you're at a point where you can do things yourself and you can help yourself. And for you, I think that would be such a beautiful thing, because I can imagine that, that from a perspective of, you would love the fact that the separated couple are then putting the children first and making sure that, that they're at that point where, okay, they're in a good place, that they can actually work this out themselves without someone having to intervene, which means that the kids are looked after as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And then, I mean, anytime we're going through a challenge like a separation, it's helpful to really draw on whatever services and support are available, and help, whatever that might look like,
Yeah.
just to get through to that
Yeah.
next step. And that looks differently for everyone, and different at different stages in our lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, from your experience as a family mediator, what have you observed about how people handle personal challenges?
Well, I mean, what I started to notice as a mediator is that there were families with very similar circumstances, but had very different outcomes. So,
Mhm.
what one outcome in one mediation room would be very different to another. And I started noticing this in terms of the perspective or the approach of the individuals, of the families. And I started to see it in terms of opposites. So, and it could be that, in one mediation room, criticism would be quite a big topic, where it would come up, where there would be statements made and examples of scenarios where one party just feels that they're constantly being criticized, sorry.
Okay.
So I saw these types of themes. And essentially, when you're saying, I feel like I'm criticized, well, it means that I'm asking for respect because I haven't been shown respect, or I feel I haven't been shown respect. So I saw these sort of dualities is if the approach focuses on criticism, then there's less room for respect, or that's what's being asked for. And it was almost like you get to a point where there's a T intersection, and if you choose one way, that will go down the road of criticism. And as you walk down that path, you get more evidence to support that narrative.
Mm.
But there's the road that wasn't taken, and that was the respect road. And when you go along that road, you get more evidence and more support, more evidence of that supports the respect
Mm.
theory. And it wasn't just about criticism and respect. There were lots of different opposites. I started to see it as opposites that I would refer to, even was their judgment or understanding. And so these were like trends that could almost predict, because if I saw someone going down the judgment path or the criticism path, then the process tended to be a little bit slower and feel a little bit heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a bit more of staying in the past.
Mm.
And
Oh,
when we're in the past, then it's harder to
mm.
move forward and make future decisions. And I mean, in mediation, it's about making decisions for the future in how to work together. But if you're in criticism and judgment and the past mode and even punish mode, it makes it harder to make decisions for the family as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. I love that point that you're saying about, that criticism is like focusing on the past, actually, because when you're filled with all that anxiety and the stress and the sadness, and then, probably some hatred in there as well, you do tend to go to the past, don't you? Because you're drawing on that. It's almost giving you reason why you're feeling like this. I need to feel like this because this happened.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also can justify why you're not agreeing to current proposals because of the past experience.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. That's really interesting. Thank you. That's given me something very good to. I'll be thinking of that over the weekend for sure. And so, how would you describe the strength-based approach in your own words?
Well, just drawing on those, the idea of opposites, what I started seeing with these trends that I sort of overlapped them with my study as a counsellor and looking into trauma and child development is that it started to highlight a strengths-based approach, or the theory behind a strengths-based approach. And essentially, a strengths-based approach categorizes all thoughts, feelings, and actions under two labels. They can either come under what's wrong or what's strong.
Okay.
So the path of criticism and judgment and punishment and staying in the past, that comes under the heading of what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the opposite, which would be having a future focus, showing respect, showing understanding, and even forgiveness, was more under what's strong.
Mm.
So that's where I kind of merged my observations with the study of strengths-based approach and could really see things in terms of what's wrong and what's strong. And that really helped me to just articulate or, describe or categorize what I was seeing, not just in the mediation room, but in myself, in scenarios, in the way that I had handled other situations, upon reflection. I was able to see which path I took in those situations. And just having this very kind of, I think they're very simple categories, what's wrong and what's strong, and being able to see the examples that I saw in mediation. And I mean, you can make up your own because there's lots of things that can come up. These are just the ones that I've noticed.
Yeah.
I guess I saw that really opened up a new world of reflection for me because I had a starting point to then think, well, am I under this heading or this heading?
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, I think, yeah. Don't you love that? I love that the work that you have done for others and for helping them through is then given you these tools as well to be able to then use in your own life.
That's right. I mean, we all say we learn from our mistakes, but sometimes it helps. You can learn from other people's mistakes as well. Well, not or other people's journeys. We don't want to say mistake. It's all a journey because I guess, and that's one thing that I really, highlight is that a mistake is a mistake when we focus on what's wrong, but when we flip it into what's strong, then it's a learning opportunity.
Mm.
So, and sometimes we miss those learning opportunities because we're not ready to take it on, and that's fine. But it's just, relabeling it from a mistake to a learning opportunity.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's a lot more that we need to talk about, but I need to just take us to our to an ad break and to hear from our sponsors. But when we come back, yeah, there's so many things that I want to ask you. So just give us a couple of minutes, everyone, and we'll hear from our sponsors, and then we'll come back. Thanks, Rosemary. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Rosemary. So, Rosemary, we were just talking about how the strengths-based approach works with your clients, but then how you've realised that it can work with you as well. So, was there a particular moment when you realised the impact of this approach on healing and growth?
Yes, definitely. And it really started when I got my first job as a family mediator.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I say my journey took a little bit, it took a while to get there, essentially because I wasn't ready. So when I got there, I found myself working for an organization that prided itself on being strengths-based.
Okay.
And so it was a very different scenario for me because I found myself working in with other people, team members and managers who really applauded my achievements. They supported my strengths and the way I worked. I was given work that was clients that felt would work well with me because of the way that I am, my characteristics and the way that I work. So my strengths were continually highlighted. And it was a very different experience for me because in my jobs prior to that, it was more about highlighting what's wrong, highlighting where I needed to change, who I needed to be like, but it wasn't me. And, I guess what I was doing wrong and what I needed to strive for. I needed to keep trying to get a promotion, to do to do X, Y, Z. But it was always like there was some kind of lacking in me that it was highlighting. Whereas here it was the strengths, that my strengths were continually being highlighted. And it actually made it easier for me to believe in myself. Whereas in the past, I had, struggled with, low self-esteem and sense of self, and the jobs and even the friendships, right? Everything in my life really supported that view. Whereas here I had someone giving me evidence, working in an organization that was giving me evidence of my strengths and what I did well. And I started to believe it.
Right.
And as I started to believe it, it was just a ricochet effect. Everything sort of changed at that point. I, became more confident in myself. And, I think up until that point, I knew that I was a good mediator, but I really had the opportunity to really show it. And because of my lack of confidence, no one really believed it. No one would think, oh, how could she do that?
Yeah.
That's what I thought anyway. That's what but then, yeah, things just changed. And then I started using the strengths-based approach also with my clients, because it was personally, it really suited my personality a bit better to be more on the understanding side than the judgment side anyway. But having experienced the strengths-based approach, it made it easier for me to then use it in my work.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? I've had a career in HR for a very long time, and it's so interesting when through the years how giving feedback has changed. So it used to be if you're going to give negative feedback, give a good piece and a negative piece and then a good piece. They talked about the feedback sandwich and those sort of things. But it's really interesting as humans, because I find that someone can tell you 10 different things that you're really good at, but then if there's one thing that they say, but this is what you're not very good at this, or the way that they word it, you just focus on that one thing, don't you? You don't think about the 10 things that they have made you feel amazing about yourself. So when we're talking about the strength-based approach, is it then particularly around the wording and the way that the feedback is given? Because if, I'm sure that they were telling you these are all your strengths, but would they be giving you also feedback on things that you could learn from or you could grow from, or is it just only about your strengths?
No, there was a bit of both, but then again, yes, it was also on the delivery. But at the same time, because my sense of self had been elevated, I was more resilient.
Yeah.
So I could take on more challenges generally. And then even in terms of, where there was room for improvement, because there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
I wasn't really stuck on it and dwelling on it and making that stop me from moving forward. It was a learning opportunity.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Wow. And so have you had times, obviously I wouldn't get you to divulge information that you've worked with your clients, but have there been times where this strength-based approach, your clients have had aha moments?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, and you can see it even in, their posture
Of
and their
course.
approach
Yeah.
and in their thinking. And sometimes, in mediation, we tend to take breaks as well. And so sometimes just having that break to go out and reflect and then come back and then, or even have a private session. Like because in the mediation, there would be both parents in the room, and then I'd have a private session with each of them. And so sometimes it's in that moment, or sometimes it's not, I don't even see it.
Yeah.
I don't personally see that moment, but then I hear about it, or maybe I don't hear about it, but because it's even just reframing the criticism to a call for respect, then even just hearing that can be, oh, well, I haven't been showing respect.
Yeah, beautiful. And I could imagine that with anything like that, as we grow and we have these aha moments, I think it's really lovely that you're part of these clients' journeys, in the sense of when they're moving out of this, that then they've learned a lot about themselves. They're from a terrible situation, they've actually grown as a person, but grown in a way that perhaps their bitterness and the criticism and the judgment is probably less, and they're looking more at what they're, even just personally, what their strengths are and what they're really good at, so that they're coming out of this in a completely different frame of mind.
Yeah. And I think, one of the important parts of the process is non-judgment, because I'm there not to judge. And I mean, I'm only human. So sometimes, I might show judgment in some way.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the client will tell me about it. Because think about times you're having a conversation with anyone generally and you felt judged. It's hard to then work with that person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, clients will be very quick to say, hold on a minute, even if it wasn't my intention, but just sometimes the words come out and then you think, oh, that's actually that's not what I meant.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And so I just own it
yeah.
and say that, and if I miss it, they will tell me. But it really showed me the importance of language and
Yeah.
non-judgment, because, and then, thinking about this idea of being strengths-based with ourselves in our reflection, well, that's where non-judgment is super important.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that I've heard before. There's a saying that some people, when they're really hard on themselves, ask your if you've got someone in your life that's being really hard on themselves and negative self-talk, ask them, would you ever speak to me like that? And if they say no, I would never speak to you like that. Well, why are you speaking to yourself like that?
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
self-judgment is very easy. But yeah, if you flip it that way, I've actually asked a friend that before, and they've actually had that moment of,
Yeah.
so yeah, that self-reflection and being kind to yourself.
That's right.
It's the best gift that you can be.
Yeah.
Give yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so your book focuses a lot on overthinking. So what exactly is it, and how does it affect people?
Yeah. And again, drawing on the strengths-based approach, I see overthinking as an analysis of a situation that highlights what's wrong.
An analysis of the situation. Right.
So
Okay.
that
Yep.
could be, self-doubt, jumping to conclusions, the continual questions, thinking about past situations so much, and, excessive worry
Mm-hmm.
about future decisions
Yep.
or future situations. So any kind of rumination that really focuses on what's wrong, that would be my definition of overthinking. And then I guess with that way of thinking, as we've said already, it's hard to move forward because it keeps you in the past, because either you're overthinking past mistakes or past scenarios that you would term as mistakes, and then scared to then move forward or try something new, or go into that relationship, trust someone, or even apply for a job, or whatever the case may be, or move house. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It keeps us in the past. And then if we're constantly looking at what's wrong in the situation, and generally it tends to be about ourselves, but it could also be about a situation or our involvement in a situation, then it's really hard for us to believe in ourselves. And then when we don't believe in ourselves, like I go back to my my career, where I had the strengths-based approach, mediation role, and then before that, there was an obvious change in my sense of self because I didn't believe in myself.
Yeah.
So it was harder for me to make decisions, to move forward, to apply for those jobs, to do things that would show that I believe in myself and that I can do it. Even just to put my hand up and ask a question, in at school or in a workshop or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's hard for us to believe in ourselves. It's hard for us to then manage adversity because we're less resilient, because we're stuck in that heaviness. And then there are also situations where we want to do things and the people around us think it's a bad idea, or they'll highlight what's wrong as well for us. And if we're already overthinking it, that's just going to be the justification we need not to pursue what we really want to do.
Yeah.
But when we do believe in ourselves and other people don't, it's easier for us to continue and move forward and make the decisions and take whatever risk we're thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm assuming, because I'm not necessarily an overthinker now, but I have been in the past about things, is that when you're overthinking things, you tend to then ask a lot of people, what do you think? And then that actually exacerbates the problem, because then you get everybody's opinion and then you feel like you need to take all of that on, and then you overthink all of that as well. And it just keeps you even more stuck.
Yeah, getting that, asking for constant reassurance. And
yeah,
if we really just strip that down and look at it, because I find that I learn from what's happening and what's not happening. That's what really jumped out, a big theme in my life and in the strengths base, what's happening and what's not happening. When we are asking others for their advice, well, what's not happening is that we're not trusting our own. Or we need a bit of reassurance, and that's fine. Like we all do it. I do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't trust myself all the time, but and it can change situation to situation, because sometimes it's just, what color do you think suits me better? Or, something a little bit more to, should I apply for this job, or something more that has a greater impact on one's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really, well, what's happening, but what's also not happening. I'm not trusting myself. I'm not believing myself. I'm too scared to, be led by what's coming from me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have found that myself, that the more confidence I have gained in myself and the more confidence I have about the decisions that I make, I'm less sharing of the things that I am going to do, because I find that I already know what I'm going to do, and I already know that decision that I'm going to make. I mean, obviously, if it's a big decision, I do consult my husband. I don't just go and make these decisions and not tell him. But I do find myself with other people when they say, oh, what's going on? What have you got going on? Often I'll just say, oh, there's quite a lot going on at the moment. I'll fill you in at the right time. Because I'm so excited about something that I don't want to then share it and then think, oh, I'll say, oh, really? You're going to do that? Or, oh, is that a bit of a risk? Or I don't want to hear that. I actually, because I trust myself and I've got so much confidence in myself, that then I'm just comfortable to make that decision. But that's taken a long time. I'm just turned 50 this year, and it's probably only been the last few years that I've had that confidence. So it's taken a long time.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And then I guess the opinion and thoughts of others have less weight.
Yep.
So therefore, I'm not going to ask them. Well, I really love that, because I can see that in myself as well. I can see that in others, how, the more, I guess the more confident or sure we are of ourselves and what we're doing, then, we don't call on other people. Correct. And it can be different in different parts of life, like different topics or different themes. That's fine. Yeah, but I really love that. Yeah.
And it is, and it's and you would know this, like, it's freeing, isn't it? Because it's that the more confident you are, you just, I don't know, you just sit in it more comfortably, and then you make a decision. And sometimes the things that I do or I say I'm going to do and I do it and it doesn't work out, well, it doesn't matter. And actually, if I haven't told anyone that I was going to do it and got their opinion and it doesn't work, then I don't need to explain it.
Yeah, that's right. It's your decision anyway.
Exactly. So since overthinking is such a common issue, how did you turn it into a tool for self-reflection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we go back to the idea of using opposites and what's happening and what's not happening as ways to learn and grow, then if overthinking is an analysis of a situation that focuses on what's wrong, then self-reflection is an analysis of a situation that focuses on what's strong. So if you can do one, you can do the other.
Yeah.
It's just about rewriting the path, or going back to, the T intersection where you've got what's wrong on one side and what's strong on the other side. We may have a tendency to go to what's wrong. So this is about realigning the GPS, I guess, to go to what's strong as the default. Doesn't have to be all of the time, because that's, that would be impossible, and that's unreal. You're going to put yourself up to fail.
Yeah.
If the approach is I have to be on what's strong the whole time.
Yeah.
It's more about the awareness and the reflection. And if you've got this way of categorizing, I mean, some people like to write and in their reflections. You can do a written reflection. It can be just thinking about it, because if you are doing something or having a thought and then thinking, I'm focusing on what's wrong here. Okay, what would be the alternate if I was focusing on what's strong? What impact would that have? What would that look like?
Yeah. And do you think that courage is something that people tend to turn on when they're doing that sort of thing. So that's probably not a very good question. Courage for me, I think, is when you think, okay, I'm going to decide to go left instead of right.
Yeah.
And I think that having courage to make changes, or to hear, or to even have the courage to go, I'm going to look at my strengths this time, not at my weaknesses. Do you think that courage is a value?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And then I'm just trying to think in my head very quickly, what would be the opposite of courage?
Fear, maybe, or
anything, fear or
what other word would be? I can't. Yeah, it's weird. It's not really a word, but I get nervous
yeah,
or shaky sort of thing.
yeah,
Like, oh
that's
no, I
exactly right.
couldn't go
Anything
that
that
way.
comes under that
Yeah, yeah,
would be the opposite. So then I guess that's, let's learn from what's happening and what the alternatives or what's not happening.
yeah,
And yes, it does take courage to do something different, or to rewrite the narrative that we are used to, because for many, and even biologically, the default can be more aligned towards what's wrong. So to actually change that, because it's a habit, and changing habits takes time, takes practice, and sometimes we have to go against what our initial instinct would tell us, because it's what we're being taught to do and what we're used to. So it does take courage. And then that, it's hard to be courageous if you don't believe in yourself.
yeah. Oh yes, yeah. Good point.
So, and when I guess, and what contributes to courage and believing in yourself, it's having a view of yourself that focuses on what's strong. And then I'll take you back to the example of when I started work as a mediator in a strengths-based environment, where I was given evidence of my own strengths. And then that sort of looped into my own sense of self and the way that I believe in myself and my ability to believe in myself more. And it's not to say that I guess at that point I needed someone to show me a different narrative. That's how my narrative started to change.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that it has to come that way.
Yeah.
But that's how my life sort of panned out. I was given it that way. And so you got outside showing you strengths. It's easier for the inside to then show strengths. And it doesn't matter which one starts first, because they feed each other anyway.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where, because your inside belief and strength is at a level where there's less influence on outside.
Yeah.
So it's about how can we rewrite our own narrative from taking the path of what's wrong to what's strong. And it doesn't have to be all the time. And it can be upon reflection. I'm thinking about, what I did, or the thought, the train of thought that I was having at that point, that was all on what's wrong. Yeah. And sometimes that's enough just to help raise that awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. So interesting. This is amazing. So have you got any practical tips or techniques for calming overthinking and then using it productively?
Yes. And I guess that the first technique that I offer is really drawing on my legal background and my legal studies, and it's because, law and mediation are quite opposites in different ways of thinking. But there is some value in drawing on legal processes to help tame overthinking. And what I draw on are the rules of evidence. In Australia, they're referred to as the rules of evidence. And, if you've ever watched any sort of TV court drama, and, someone will say, oh, that's not admissible.
Yes.
Or yell out words to that effect, or depending on which country you're in and what system is in place. Well, that's really more about the process than the content. It's saying that piece of evidence that you are relying on is unsubstantiated. So we can't use it in our legal process.
Yep.
Right. So in overthinking, we tend to rely on unsubstantiated evidence all the time.
Oh, that's so good.
The opinion, the gossip, the jumping to conclusions and assumptions.
Yeah.
All these things, you can't rely on them in court. You would lose.
Yeah.
So maybe we should then reconsider how much weight we give these types of evidence. And it's really, any evidence that doesn't have a witness. And it could be a person as a witness or a document or something, a physical element that substantiates that.
Right.
So that's using the rules of evidence to tame overthinking.
Yeah.
And it really came up because I made a statement and someone said to me, "Hey, you've got a law degree. How can you say that?" Oh, you're right. Because and they also had a law degree, so I knew exactly what they meant.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's it. Rules of evidence. If it's not admissible, then I should reconsider how much weight. And I mean, look, the exception would be intuition.
Yeah.
But looking at intuition and assumptions sometimes get blurred.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And it's hard to differentiate. And if we are in a place where we're in a bit of crisis, we're a bit stressed and we have an important decision to make, we're going to be biologically and maybe even personally more aligned to think of what's wrong anyway. Yeah. So it's a good time for intuition to step in, but it's also a good time for an assumption to disguise as intuition. It's very hard to tell, but I guess in my experience, I find intuition is not logical.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not, if I do X, Y will happen, or if I don't do X, Y will happen, so I have to do Y.
Yeah.
That's very sequential and logical.
Yeah.
Then for me, that's the sort of red flag. Actually, it might not be intuition. It might just be me jumping to conclusions and making a negative assumption, joining the dots.
Yeah. 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 And I also think too, it's a really good point that you make because like when you're learning about using your intuition, the confidence and having the courage to use it too comes in. So for me, I trust my intuition intrinsically, but it's been a long time that I've been building it up and I've been growing it and trusting it. But it's also then having that courage as well to make a decision based on that. But I love that. I think that's really great because there's so many things that I think if you're overthinking something and then you actually verbalized it to someone and said, these are all the reasons, I would think probably more than half of them, the other person would be saying, well, that's not true. That's not who you are, or you would never do this. You would, if we actually verbalized it and actually had someone vetting that information, they'd probably scrub out and not admit a lot of that stuff. It'd be inadmissible.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. Really interesting. And so what are some of the easy ways people can use strength-based thinking to deal with challenges in their everyday lives?
And I think it really comes down to that awareness, and learning, because it's really about personal growth. I mean, I can say to you, think about your thoughts, feelings, and actions on a daily basis, or how you've managed situations in the past, or a major event or an incident. Can you really hone in on whether or not they focused on what's wrong or what's strong? And sometimes it's about looking at, and I guess in my book I have reflection tasks to help people sort of really identify and highlight where they're at and where their learnings are, because it is an individual journey, and I'm really big on doing tasks, whether or not it's sort of mental or written down, and sometimes reflecting on a situation and just writing down or thinking through, was I coming under what's wrong or what's strong? What were my thoughts, feelings, and actions in that instant?
Yeah.
And what would they come under?
Yeah.
And then that can help us see the alternate road, the road that we didn't take. And that can also help us see the change and the growth when we start to be more aware and think, oh, in the past, I might have been dwelling on that for so long.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about taking the path of what's strong and in day to day. It's also about starting your day about to do something or think about something and going down the what's wrong path and then catching yourself and then thinking, okay, take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
What's the alternate?
Yeah.
How can I go towards the what's strong path? I don't necessarily have to be right on it. And I guess what you find is that certain areas of our lives take longer.
Mm-hmm.
And in other areas, we'll get it a lot quicker and we'll be able to see it. Or just that moment between taking that path of what's wrong and having that realization, that moment can get quicker and quicker or shorter and shorter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's really about the awareness. And I guess, going back to sort of some of the practices, one practice that I do encourage is meditation or any sort of kind of mindfulness or spiritual practice that gives you that time to sort of turn off from outside influence.
Yeah.
And for me, that is meditation. And because I guess, and the research supports, the impact that it has on the brain. So it's like, physical training for the brain so that those processes of reflection get stronger, or the parts of the brain that we want to enhance get enhanced, whereas the parts of the brain that we want to sort of tone down, that anxiety and stress and being highly emotional, that, tones down. And I can see it in myself when I have periods of without meditation.
Yeah.
I become more reactive.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
that's how I see it in me. And so I know that I need something. I mean, it doesn't have to be meditation, but anything that, anything mindful. I mean, there's lots of research on it and lots of study, and it can come under look like all different types of practices.
Yeah.
But that can help make rewriting the narrative
Yeah.
a little bit smoother.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. And so, Rosemary, can our audience get a copy of your book? How would they get a copy of the book? Go onto your website, and then is there a link there to be able to get a copy?
Yeah, there's my website, and website would be the best place to go to, but also, most online, big online booksellers.
Yep. Great.
You could go and try your favorite or local.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Rosemary, can you believe we've only actually got a couple more minutes to go?
Time flies.
I know, I told you it would. I told you it would. So I'll ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests before we finish our conversation. So what is your favorite quote and why is it so important to you?
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a Dolly Parton quote.
Yes.
That I really love, and it's really relevant at this point. It says, "We cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails."
Beautiful. That just fits in and just ties in so beautifully to what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it really does.
It does. It really does. Rosemary, I just want to thank you so much for just being such an inspiration today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I have no doubt that myself and the audience will have a lot to think about over the weekend. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you also to our amazing dedicated audience and supporters, and also to our sponsors. And I hope that everybody has an amazing and beautiful weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. And thank you again, Rosemary. It's just been really lovely to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Great. Thanks.